Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Truth That Heals podcast. I am your host, Ryan Anthony Hernandez, and today I'm with a special guest, author of the book Healing the Wounds of Childhood and Culture, An Adventure of a Lifetime, Don St. John. Don, thank you for joining.
No, you're very welcome. I'm excited and feeling really good about being here with you this morning, Ryan.
Well, thank you. And before we really get diving into this interview, can you briefly introduce yourself and tell the audience a little bit about what you do professionally, and maybe if you want to share a little bit more, then that'd be perfect as well.
Well, I'll start with saying that I'm semi-retired at 80 years old, and I see patients, but about half time, and I teach workshops in fluid movement. It's a system called Continuum. It's an exploration in our fluidity. And I write, and I've been doing a number of these shows, sharing my point of view and what I've learned. And, I had some challenging beginnings. I mean, really challenging. And at some point, I knew I needed help. That was some 60 years ago. And, I was 20 years old, and I realized I was heading down a pretty rocky road. And the outcome I just intuitively knew wasn't going to be pretty. So I started in psychotherapy, and that was the beginning of an adventure. I call it an adventure because, an adventure typically has its challenges, but we embark on adventures for the rewards, knowing that, we'll meet the challenges. Some will be unexpected, some will be greater than we thought they would be. Some would be easy, but we'd meet them, and the rewards, the sights, the feelings, would just make it all very, very worthwhile. And that's why I call this journey an adventure of a lifetime.
And I love what you've mentioned, all of that, especially that part of making it worthwhile. And I bring that up because sadly, there are so many people out there, even myself previously, where there are moments of sadness, depression, feeling loneliness. But I really like that what you share about fluidity and adventure, but sadly many people are stuck in that dark zone. uh but I see that you're very healthy. You're really doing good things. But I would like to kind of dive into what was life like before you started that adventure, if we can get into that, if that's okay.
Sure. You know, growing up, I had my ambition for most of my childhood. After I gave up the idea of ever being a professional baseball player at about age 9, uh, I decided that I wanted to be a prize fighter. I wanted to be middleweight champion of the world. And, I harbored that illusion for a number of years. It was my favorite sport, both to engage and to watch. But by the time I was 15, I was beginning to realize I didn't have the stuff, to be a professional fighter. I just didn't have that determination that it takes, that toughness that it takes. Uh, so I didn't know what to do. And after high school, and there was a great deal of trauma in my background, just over the top level trauma. And so I was pretty frozen on the inside. I didn't have access to my feelings, emotions, intuitions. You know, I had access only to my fantasies. And when I gave up the ambition to be a professional sports player or fighter, there was nothing left. So 2 days after high school, I headed down to San Antonio as an enlisted man in the U.S. Air Force. And while I was there, I got stationed in Bermuda after the first year. Not a very difficult assignment, but I took some courses with the University of Maryland's overseas program in Bermuda. And I discovered to my surprise that I actually liked school when I was treated respectfully as an adult and, not a juvenile delinquent. And it was in the Air Force that I decided that I need help. And, uh, one step led to another, to a PhD program at the University of Kansas, to a recognition that traditional psychotherapy was nowhere near enough to provide the healing that was necessary, that I really had to explore the relationship of the body to psychological healing. I had to explore relationships in much more depth, and I had to explore spirituality. Now that was a process that occurred over years. I'm expressing it here in 2 minutes, but I'm describing a process that took a long, long time to evolve. And, it continues to this day. And the, one of the reasons that I'm sitting here is that I came to recognize, to see without any doubt that most human beings, most of us, would do well to engage a healing journey, that most of us live way below potential our potential for life, our potential to experience ourselves in such a bigger, more beautiful way. And it's not an individual problem, it's a collective problem. It's, or maybe it's part of our collective evolution, that we're growing a comprehension of what human beings need in order to be fully themselves.
Well, thank you for really elaborating and sharing with us that your journey wasn't a one day thing, but as you've mentioned, it was a process and it is still
Yeah.
developing as we go. I think many people, including myself, have had those experiences where it's it seems scary to engage in the healing journey because there was a part of me in the past which felt I'm too broken to be fixed. For you, as you've had so many years of experience, what was it like initially when you started to discover the human potential and the ability to make life into this beautiful adventure?
Yeah, that's a great question, Ryan, and a great point that you bring up, that so many people, and myself included, because I was a battered child. And I almost died when I was born to begin in a traumatic way. And so I believe that I was way too broken. that, you know, there wasn't too much that could be done to salvage what had become of me. Uh, many different things, the tendency towards addictions, tendency toward depression, relationship dysfunction, uh, you know, all kinds of things that no need to go into, but just to say that they were pretty hard, pretty challenging. And, that's too is what I came to believe. And one of the moments, one of the things that turned it around for me is took a while. It took several years. And I'm talking about, psychotherapy, different kinds of seminars and workshops and, self-improvement and this and that. It took several years when I came to one of the most important realizations I could have had, and that is we are all wounded to one degree or another. We are, that's why I use the word wounds instead of trauma. Too many people believe that no, there was no trauma in my childhood, everything was normal. And I ask one question: were you able, were you able to share all your feelings with your parents? Could you sit down and tell them what was really going on in your heart and soul? And if the answer is no, you know,
Yeah,
you
they
weren't trusting. You weren't trusting your most important relationships to be able to open your heart and reveal yourself to them. You see, there's this tension between authenticity and parental approval. We give up our authenticity to stay in that sometimes very narrow range of acceptance of parental approval. Does that make, is that clear?
that makes perfect sense. Yeah, it really holds a lot of people back, and I of course I will always look at myself, looking at not just parents, but at in church. You have those authority leaders who you don't want to disappoint, but then it's holding back that authenticity. And I think authenticity is something which can be so pure, so beautiful, but it's just at times it's hard to tap into. But I really enjoy how you're opening that door for us.
Yeah, it can be very hard to tap into, especially when we were, conditioned, powerfully conditioned to not be authentic, but to be as other people believe we should be. And as you mentioned, not just parents, but ministers, pastors, teachers, and on and on. So yeah, it's challenging. And then, the more life negating the messages that we receive as a kid, for example, anything implying that our sexuality is bad, is a life negating message that has profound effects, not only on our psyche, but on our bodies as well. We literally shape ourselves, okay? Shape ourselves to conform to those injunctions, to those messages, to those requirements to be good within this family or community structure. That's a mouthful.
It's a mouthful. No, I wouldn't say it's a mouthful. I think it's it's a reality that many of us live in, and it's good to face it in a healthy way. Because if it's not approached in the healthy way, I stayed in that box for a long time, and I think that hearing your message is a healthy way to give the tools to the audience members on how to open up that authenticity and that uh, human potential, which I think is something which is so beautiful. And getting into, the human potential, life's purpose, healing. I would like to ask you, what views have you constructed regarding healing and, again, human potential during your years of adventure, your years of discovery?
Again, that's a great question. I love it, Ryan. So you may have to stop me to get a
Oh,
word because that's a question I can spend a fair amount of time on. First of all, I believe that if not all, most human beings have lots of wounds. Okay. But here's a key perspective. Those wounds are the stuff out of which we make the gold of our lives. Let me give you an example. Suppose a person comes in to adulthood and they start in the world of relationships and discover that they're challenged sexually. Okay. Maybe they have real difficulty reaching orgasm. Maybe they have difficulty controlling the length of time before ejaculation. Maybe, any one of a number of challenges, right? And you say, well, that's a curse. That's bad luck. That's terrible. That's a wound that has to be fixed and dealt with. Yes, and out of that wound, you can develop a rare capacity to communicate about your needs and wants, desires, fantasies, preferences in a sexual context. You could become really good at taking off all your clothes emotionally as well as sexually. Do you see what I mean? If, for example, I'll give you another completely different example. Let's say, when I was in my 20s, if you asked me to stand up in a group and say my name and where I came from, that'd be a challenge. That'd be a challenge. Today, give me 300, 500 people and let me talk to them. I have a great time. Okay. I had to work with that fear and get to the point where there was no longer a fear, but an enjoyment of that very act that terrified me. That was a wound, being afraid of showing myself, revealing myself. Okay? And the more I could do that, both on a one-to-one level and in front of an audience, to stand there and say, this is who I am. This is what happened to me. This is how I dealt with it. There's an intervening step. This is what happened to me. This is how I made sense of it. And usually we make sense of it by concluding we're defective.
Mhm.
Straight out, we're defective. Okay. We're deficient. we're not good enough, or we have to do A, B, C, D, E in order to be good enough, because fundamentally, we're not good enough. Okay. So that's how we make sense of it. So let me start over. What happened? Um, how we made sense out of what happened, waking up to that, and now starting to do something about it.
I'm going to interrupt you right there, just very briefly.
So that's fine. I'm finished with that. Go ahead.
Okay, because uh, the part that you mentioned at the end, the doing something about it, that's a very important part. However, when so many, talk to themselves and again, looking at the problem, and then they'll tell themselves, I am the problem, and then case closed, nothing is done about it, or communication between in intimacy or whether it's in a group, the communication ends because as going into what you're saying, uh, there's this shame which I think is very dangerous. But how do people let go of this shame? Because, being intimate sexually with someone, it's something beautiful, or being able to speak in public and to simply introduce yourself, it can be a very powerful thing. But there's a lot of shame that many people have from childhood. Is there a tool that you can share, or maybe a first step which can help enable someone who is in that dark period to probably slowly start walking into a life of authenticity and healing?
Uh, how many days do you have for the answer to that question? But let's start. It's a big question. It's a
Yes.
big question. It's important. It's an important question. And, one of the reasons I'm here, one of the reasons I'm doing shows like this to give people hope. I think that's first and foremost. And one of the best recognitions, can start as a simple thought, but to really get it as a truth that you're not alone. You're not alone. It's that feeling of being alone with your shame that makes it so crippling. We hide. Shame compels us to hide. It's what shame is. It's like, yuck. There's a defect here. It's ugly, and I can't ever let you or anyone else see it. And nobody has it like me. You know, I'm alone with this. Once you realize, Ryan, that that's not true, it's not true. You're joined by millions, millions with very similar feelings. Once that sinks in, okay, then maybe you can begin. Then the next thing I recommend is find out what's available. They're books that can start you on the path. My book, that's one of the reasons that I wrote it, is to help people first understand what happened, and second, understand what's available to them. So yeah, my book, Gabor Mate, you may have heard of Gabor. His book, The Myth of Normal. Uh, you know, we don't want to try to be normal. God forbid. We want to be ourselves, our fullness. We want our wholeness, we want to be whole human beings, relationally capable of deep intimacy, capable of revealing ourselves at our choice. Not to everybody we meet, of course, but at our choice to emotionally take off all the garments and say, here I am. Here I am. We want to feel our bodies not as these heavy, burden laden structures, but the body, Ryan, the body is 70% water. There's a whole system out there to learn how to be fluid in your body, how to make it more capable of resonance and relationship, right? And you embark on this journey to get to the point where all those deep fears about, your inner ugliness or defectiveness are recognized for what they are. BS. They're BS. There's a spark in you just waiting to shine.
Thank you so much for that message. And I think it's empowering to hear from you that there's a spark in all of us. And I think that I want to see that spark turn into a light, a flame. And I can't wait to start reading your book. I'll be honest, I haven't started, but because there's so many good books, and you've mentioned a few already in this podcast. And I bring that up because uh, one thing that has helped me personally in my own healing journey, besides, of course, therapy and uh, was reading, reading books
Mm.
and opening my mind that I'm not alone. I think reading a lot of memoirs helped me to
Mhm.
connect that what I have been through, my own wounds, there was 10 years ago, I would have thought to myself, I'm alone in this world. No one understand. Nobody gets it. But as I started exploring different literature, it started opening that world that it's possible to connect. And like you said, uh, telling oneself I'm not alone. And I think that was very important for my personal journey because once I I said to myself, I'm not alone. That's when I was able to really open out. And when I started doing the podcast, when I the very beginnings, I couldn't show my face. I had a small microphone. I would be shaking, but I was determined because kind of going on what you're saying, there was a purpose, there was a meaning uh, behind living life. And I think that that's something which I hope that the audience gets from hearing also your story, that it's a beautiful thing to live life and to live life to the full. And
Absolutely.
I wanted to thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, for sharing your knowledge, and for sharing about your book with the audience.
Thank you for doing this. I commend you on your courage and your wisdom to embark on that journey. And, there's no end, Ryan. There's
I
no end. That light can shine brighter. It can touch more people. It can help more people discover their own light. And I think that's what we're here to do. One of the things I'm sensing, we have another minute or two here.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
Okay. One of the things I am sensing is that there is the beginnings of a turnaround in our culture. Just an example from a patient I was working with yesterday, a woman who had a very, very harsh childhood, emotionally completely neglected by both parents, physically made to work hard on a farm and with no like emotional rewards. And she's managed to give her children something that she never received herself. And her children can share themselves with her and her husband. They can reveal themselves, their emotions, their challenges. And it's a beautiful thing to watch, you know. She's not passing down that trauma that she received. She's turning it around. And I think this is happening more and more and more. It may take another 10 generations, you know, before it's the norm. You know, we have to balance between, you know, 100 years ago, it was spare the rod and spoil the child. You beat them, you know, you just beat them when they disobeyed. Speak when you're spoken to, you know,
Mhm.
uh, don't speak unless you're asked. Those kinds of things, and it went all the way to the other side. You know, let them do whatever they want. Uh, let them be free, etc. So we have to recognize that structure is important as well as emotional nourishment and you know, love and connection, but also structures so a child feels safe in their world. So we're in that process, and I sense the beginning of a turnaround where parents are recognizing it's important that children can identify, acknowledge, express what they're feeling, and do that in a respectful way. That's
Well,
all I want.
just to kind of wrap things up, what I wanted to share with you, what I really enjoyed from this interview is collecting from you some very important elements, and it is you know, the spirituality, the emotions, the body, and I bring, and also the mind. I bring that up because I think so oftentimes people have it scattered. You know, the spiritual life is separated uh, from the emotions and relational. But you found a way to put these all together in this interview and to have all these uh, essential elements to be in one toolbox. And I wanted to thank you for that.
Oh, you're most welcome. It was a work of 60 years. Right?
And you have your book. Where can the audience find this book?
Uh, Amazon for sure. Probably order it in any bookstore because it's, you know, on the book list. But Amazon for sure, and on my website. And there's a lot of other resource information on my website. My website is more designed to help people find things that are out there, more than promoting my business, my because I'm semi-retired, I'm not trying to work more. So yeah, just check into my website and it's www.pathsofconnection.com.
So I'll be leaving all of that, those links in the show notes, your website, also the link for the Amazon, so that people can purchase your book. And so check out the book by Don St. John. And again, thank you so much, Don, for being a guest on the Truth That Heals podcast.
Well, it's been my pleasure. I really enjoyed talking to you, Ryan.